General, in 2014, when this initiative regarding reassuring our allies in Europe came into existence, there was a certain climate that pre-existed that caused us to think this was a necessary step for the United States to pursue. How would you describe the change in climate from that point in time to today?
Well, personally, I think that that the recognition in Europe, in particular, that Russia is intent on its stated goals of establishing itself as a global power, that it will press on the international norms, continue to press that after breaking international laws with respect to Ukraine, for instance, that it is intent in its modernization and the use of its military to set facts on the ground beforehand. I think that's become even more apparent since 2014, and we continue to see that drumbeat. And I think for the most part, in Europe, they understand that, and they're committed to deterrence of Russia as well. It's greater, obviously, in the East, where they face them directly, than perhaps in the South or West. But the alliance has been strong, and I think our partners are as well in its recognition. Warsaw made that commitment, or the alliance did at Warsaw, and I think it was quite clear.
And what's changed in regard to Russia's efforts? Has there been a consequence of our reassurance efforts in a response from Russia and how we would expected them to behave, or how they're changing their behavior?
Well, I think if you look at their stated response, they recognize what we're doing. I think they are concerned about the changes that we have made as in the United States in terms of the rotational forces that we've now put in, what NATO has done with enhanced forward presence. It has their attention. I think their response is one to say that they are deterred by that. They have recognized it. They have said publicly that they're making adjustments on their western border and in the Baltic and Black Sea as a result of that. So I think that's the response that I look for. I wish we had a crystal ball we could see clearly the cognitive impact on the regime in Russia, but I can't say that clearly at this point.
What more needs to be done to reassure our allies and to deter Russian aggression? I don't know that there's a solid answer to this question, but I'm interested in your thought process. How do we know we're in the position we need to be, that our allies feel reassured and those that we oppose for their actions feel constrained?
Senator, that's really the tough question. I mean, we look at it, we're in a deterrence posture now, and determining how we assess the effectiveness of that deterrence is very difficult. Part of it's because it's a cognitive effect you're trying to have more so than a posture effect. And so it's more difficult. And I can talk about it more in a classified, but I think that what we need to do is we need to stay strong with our allies. We need to ensure with our country, and as much as we can with them, that we approach this from a whole-of-government approach. The Russians see this as a whole-of-society approach. They don't see a differentiation between what they do in the military with respect to their actions. They include diplomatic, economic leverage, etc. I think our response has to recognize that as well. And then we need to also improve our posture, because we need to have a strong front. That's what Russia respects, is strength.
When we visited in Europe with you earlier this year, we had been to France and Germany, both concerned about intrusion by Russia into their elections. Any update, any sense of what's going on in that regard?
They both continue to be very concerned about it, France in particular. I think publicly you saw that France believes they did have some influence, indirect influence, by Russia in terms of who they preferred to see elected. There was a relationship there as well in terms of what we had learned and our ability to help them posture themselves to protect against that. and Germany shares the same concerns. And there's a number of other elections between now and fall in Europe where Russia is known to have been directly involved with parties that they can influence or politicians as well.
What's the relationship between? Let me tell it this way. We're going to spend some money on infrastructure. This committee has been supportive of that effort, and I assume will continue to do so. What do we expect, or what contribution occurs from? What do we pay for ourselves? What's NATO responsible for? What are other allies responsible for?
Well, I think we work together on sorting out exactly what you do, but I think a quick way to look at this is we are willing to put infrastructure and some funding into some of their facilities, their airfields, their ports, their storage facilities, and some of those things in order to help us early on with this step. But we expect them to put in funds that help us with that as well as support of our troops. The second thing is that we need to be able to move with some agility, both us and our European partners. And so within each of those countries, I would expect that they invest in their infrastructure, in their rail, in those fuel capacity, fuel stores, and those kinds of things that we need in order to be able to move at speed in Europe. In the Cold War, we had a very good laydown of that. The nations there had, responsibilities in terms of their nations so that we could move through countries. That's deteriorated, or let's say it's declined since the Cold War, and we're now in a process with the other nations of looking at what we need to do to have the right structure in order to provide for our agility in theater, and they're taking that on as well.
Let me ask one more question, then we'll go to Senator Schatz, and we'll have another round. Medical care and treatment for our servicemen and women. What's the status in Europe? What role does it play globally in our military efforts? What do you see as the future needs?
Well, first of all, one of our lines of effort in Europe is enable global operations. Because of our location, and particularly in the medical facilities, we service not only EUCOM and the service members there, but we often bring our wounded and those ill from Central Command, from AFRICOM, into our theater too. So Lundstuhl is a critical facility, but it was built in the 1950s. And as you know, with the help of this committee, we've been appropriated for most of the funding for the Rhine Ordnance Barracks military hospital it's already started construction. And we would ask you for the continued funding of that to complete that project in about 2021 or 22. It's critical not only to EUCOM and the health of our families and our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines there, but it's critical, I think, for our movement and our posture medically in other theaters also.
General, thank you. Senator Schatz? This subcommittee has been supportive of the Joint Intelligence Analysis Center at RAF Croughton. I think that decision was made before you arrived in your current position. There has been some suggestion that it should be built at Lodges Field. Let me ask you to explain to us, if you believe it to be true, why Croughton is the right place to relocate the existing facility. I'd be glad to hear what you have to say.
As you said, the decision was made beforehand, but when I took over, I assembled our staff. I've been there. I visited the NIFIC and our JAC that's a part of the JIAC. And I took a look at the other available bases, and I think that that Croton is the right place. I think it's correct to have those facilities, the different facilities. There are 6 different entities there co-located. What we get here is we get real synergy out of EUCOM, AFRICOM, the NATO, the DIA support apparatus, as well as BICES, which is an intelligence exchange communication system. Those are the 6 kind of pieces that make a part of that make this up. We get great synergy out of them being in one place. Number 2, the challenge today is to make sure that we can actually exchange information at a relevant speed. And today, information moves very quickly, as you know. When you co-locate those, they have an opportunity then to share intel appropriately and very quickly, as well as analysts, and discuss issues. This is powerful, and it's particularly important between NATO and the U.S. The other thing I would mention, Senator, is that for the NATO Intelligence Center that supports me in Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe under NATO, the framework nation for that intelligence facility is the United States. So what we provide in one site as a U.S. intelligence facility, that support apparatus supports NATO. If it were to be someplace else, we will also have to have the people and the resources at that other place duplicated to support that facility, because we have that commitment within NATO. Secondly, it's all 28 members have to agree on the location, et cetera, which they've done. That within NATO is an important factor here, I think. So I think for several reasons, it's actually in a very good facility. When we talk in the closed session, I can be in a little more detail on this, but I do think we have it right.
Let me just ask a little bit further. Do you, in your analysis, is there any circumstances, either as a matter of being cost-effective or a military value, that facility should be located at Lodges Field in Portugal?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
The enhanced forward presence units are all located currently in the Baltic and Poland, in the Baltics and Poland. Do you think any additional units need to be stationed in the southern flank of NATO, Romania or Bulgaria?
Senator, today, I think given the posture that we have, we're in fairly good shape. I think I'll look at that as time goes on here through the summer and into the fall. So in Romania and Bulgaria, on the NATO side, we have something similar to enhanced forward presence in the Baltics, and it's called tailored forward presence. Romania, Bulgaria, and other nations that have chosen to take part in that have formed a multinational brigade that operates in those two countries, exercises together, and provides deterrence in that area. It extends also to our maritime forces in NATO, et cetera. Secondly, we rotate forces through there almost routinely. Marines, for instance, and then also we have one of the mech battalions out of our rotational armored brigade down there now. And we'll probably be in that part, we'll probably have a unit down there out of that a good deal of the year. So I think with that capability, we are beginning to get the posture right in the southeast as well as up in the Baltics and Poland.
General, we've talked mostly about Russia. Tell me about terrorists and terrorism. What role and what stance is the United States and NATO required to necessarily to combat terrorism?
Senator, I think, first of all, the idea, and you've probably heard this before, that it takes a network to defeat a network. The terrorists, ISIS and other organizations, as you know, are reaching out globally. They have cells and operations in other countries with their headquarters, ISIS, centered in Syria and in Iraq at what they call their caliphate. And I believe our role in EUCOM is to help strengthen that network. So we've done that. We have a counter-transnational threats cell that has connected with both EU and NATO to help reinforce their network. In other words, connect with those countries and reinforce that, primarily to exchange information, exchange analysis, intelligence, and to help each other build our partner capacity in counterterrorism. Those are the steps that we've taken. NATO is taking a part in that as well. And I think that's the most effective way for us to begin to counter this terrorist threat from a military perspective.
Well, let me ask the European Reassurance Initiative, is there a component in addition to combating the aggressive nature of Russia, does those actions that we take in that regard also have a consequence in fighting terrorism?
Well, I think they do from demonstrating strength. They do in the sense that, our operational and intelligence assets, the sharing of in other domains, for instance, in cyber or information, those relationships that you build, for one, deterring Russia, play immediately into the other things that you do. So, building relationships, capacity, works hand in glove in that respect.
How are we doing? This will be my final question, then we'll turn to Senator Murphy and Senator Bozeman, and then we'll move to our classified setting. What steps are we taking? Assure me that we're taking the necessary steps, and describe those that you can, to protect our servicemen and women, their families, from terrorist activities in Europe.
We, and I say we, it's not UCOM, it's our entire intelligence community, pay very close attention to the intelligence that we get, to the intelligence that our partners can provide for us. We have a working group that's established that is not just UCOM. It is in conjunction with our intelligence community that on a very routine basis looks at this. If we see any indicator that there may be an increased threat, or certainly one that has timing, location, activity attached to it, then we bring that working group together and it comes to my attention. We've had to exercise that in Europe, more often than I would care to talk about. And to this extent, I think we've done a good job. Now, based on that, we also put out warnings, or we take steps with raising security at our bases throughout Europe or in specific places. We give warnings to both our service members and our families, and sometimes we limit their travel in areas when we need to, if at a given period of time we think there's a threat that would cause us to have that much concern. And that's the way we work it on a daily basis.
I wish you well in that regard. Senator Murphy.
Thank you.